Here's George.
Yep.
Good. We have Mario is in my house.
Good.
He came to get his certificate.
There you go. You see?
All is here.
Everybody's good.
What page did we leave off on?
You said according to them.
166.
166.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Okay, good. Havdalah.
Yes.
Okay, good. This is important shir tonight. Try to finish up the book. Thank you. Did you put Splenda here?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the stores.
You don't know you moved it today.
166. Havdalah Motzei Shabbos. You sent text to everybody, right?
Mhm.
Because I didn't send my usual. I didn't send my
No, we
usual
have
email.
George is
Yeah,
on.
George, but like Bernie, I think Walter told me he has a party. Let's just make sure Bernie knows. Maybe
He's out of town.
who?
Oh,
Well,
I don't know where Harold is.
Xander Downey.
Yaakov Yellen may have another shiur Wednesday night. Okay. Is Havdalah a Torah or rabbinic obligation? In volume 16, shiur 8, we learned that there's a biblical obligation to recite Kiddush when Shabbos begins, which we derive from the command Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'Kodsho. Remember the Shabbos day. Is the mitzvah of Havdalah also biblical, or is it rabbinic? Some Rishonim, such as the Rambam, write that Chazal derived the obligation of Havdalah from the same verse. Shamor Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'Kodsho. Although our versions of the Gemara text do not contain any such derivation. Apparently, the Rishonim had variant texts of the Gemara. Because the Rambam says in Sefer HaMitzvahs le Rambam, V'amru gan ken kadsheu b'chnisaso v'kadsheu b'tziyaso. Make the Shabbos holy when the Shabbos starts. Make the Shabbos holy by recognizing that it's different from the following secular day when it goes out. Kloimar, Havdalah shehi gam ken chelek mizchir Shabbos metukenet u'mitzvah. Havdalah is also part of the mitzvah of remembering the Shabbos. The Rambam brings in the Yad HaChazaka, mitzvah saseh b'nator l'kadosh yom HaShabbos b'dvarim, with words, shenemar zachort yom HaShabbat l'kadsho, klomar, zochreu zchirat Shabbos, zochreu zchiras shvach v'kiddush. Remember it through praise and through sanctification. And he says explicitly, Tzarech l'zochreu b'knisaso. You have to make comments about that when Shabbos begins. Uvitziyaso, and when it leaves. B'knisaso b'kiddush hayom, uvitziyaso b'avdalah. So there's no question that the way the Rambam is learning, Havdalah has the same status of Kiddush. Just like Kiddush is Doraisa, according to the Rambam, Havdalah is also Doraisa. Other Rishonim, such as Rav Shimshon Mishans, quoted by the Orchas Chaim, maintain that the chiyuv, the obligation of Havdalah, is only rabbinic. In their opinion, the reference to the verse mentioned above is merely an asmachta, which is a mnemonic, a way to remember. Because of Arash, Noshim ein mavdilos la'atzman. Women do not make Havdalah for themselves. We'll go into that a little bit more later. Dein Havdalah tluya b'shmira Shabbos. Havdalah is not part of Shabbos observance. El Rabbanan asmachu ukra. The Rabbanan find a pasuk sort of to hang their hat on. Another relevant source concerning whether Havdalah is of biblical import can be found in the Gemara in Masechta Shavuos 18a, which points to the verse to distinguish between the holy and the unholy. Lavdiel ben kodesh ulachol. Connection with Havdalah. The Magid Mishnah, who is a major commentary on the Rambam, suggests that this Gemara may serve as a potential source that Havdalah is a biblical obligation, but he points out that it's disputed. Midivrei Rabbeinu, the Magid Mishnah is commenting that from the words of the Rambam, Nira, B'bir shu sovish Havdalah gam ken dvar Torah. He says it's clear the Rambam is holding that Havdalah is min Torah. The Hakol bichlal zachor, and everything, the Kiddush and the Havdalah, falls under this rubric of zachor. V're'isi ha'meforshim zal chalukim b'zeh. He says other commentators differ. Yesh sovrim k'divrei Rabbeinu. There are those who hold like the Rambam. V'afagav de b'gemar pirkei Reb Tzachim ein sham ela zachreyu ala yain b'knisaso. That the din of zachreyu is only by Kiddush when the Shabbos starts. Mikol makom yalfin alei midichsivu lahavdil k'mo shekosov pirkei diasatuma. So there's another pasuk, lahavdil ben hakodesh uben hachol, the pasuk that the Gemara described, which is that it's important to distinguish between something that is holy and profane. When we make Havdalah, we actually use that phraseology. We say lahavdil ben hakodesh uben hachol. So up until now, the Magid Mishnah seems to be leaning towards the Rambam's view that Havdalah is midoraisa. However, he says yesh omrim she'Havdalah einan el midivrei sofrim aval kiddush udvar Torah. He's bringing the Rash that the Orchos Chaim brought. In volume 16, Shir 8, we learn that women are obligated in the mitzvah of Kiddush. Although Kiddush is a positive time-bound mitzvah, from which women are generally exempt, we saw that in this case, they are also obligated in the Kiddush because the positive Shabbos mitzvahs are linked to the prohibition of refraining from malacha on Shabbos, because it says, Zachor v'shamor b'dibur echad. The word Zachor, remember, and Shamor means observe the Shabbos commandments, are said in the same sort of, Hashem uttered both of those things at the same time. We human beings cannot say Shamor v'Zachor at the same time. It's impossible, but Hashem did it. So the way we learned over there is, since women are obligated in all the negative prohibitions of Shabbos, because there is no difference between men and women regarding the lavim, there's only a difference between men and women regarding the positive commandments, where women are exempt from time-bound positive commandments, but negative commandments, women are just as obligatory as men. So there's this connection, Shamar v'Zachor. Since women are obligated in the negative commandments of Shabbos, they're also obligated in the Kiddush. We saw also in source 16 that Rav Shimon Mishans writes that Havdalah is different. In his view, Havdalah is a rabbinic institution, which is not derived directly from Shabbos observance. And therefore, since women are not obligated in Shabbos observance, it doesn't derive from that. Since women, if it would derive from this Shabbos observance of negative commandments, then we would say the same thing by Havdalah that we say by Kiddush. Just like women have negative commandments, they have Kiddush, and we would say thing regarding Havdalah, but it doesn't derive from Shabbos observance. However, according to the Rambam, Havdalah is part of the same mitzvah as Kiddush. And according to the Rambam, women's obligation for Havdalah would be the same as men. The Maggid Mishnah argues that whether Havdalah is a biblical rabbinic obligation, women certainly are obligated. If it was Doraisa, since women have an obligation to observe the negative prohibitions of Shabbos, they would be required to do so for Havdalah as well. The imi midivrayim. But if you're going to want to say that Havdalah is only rabbinic, Dumya the Kiddush, the rabbis, when they make an injunction, they create it similar to what they're comparing to. So Havdalah is compared to what? Kiddush. Well, Kiddush, women are obligated, says the Maggid Mishnah. Therefore, even though Havdalah is only rabbinic, the rabbis obligated women as well. That's what the Maggid Mishnah is saying. V'Rabbeinu Zal Sosam Kan. The rabbis made no distinction between the two. V'kivan shlo hiskir ben potter mechlal shein chayvus. They didn't say nashim are potter from Havdalah. So you can derive from the negative the positive and say that they do have an obligation. Now, we follow the Shulchan Aruch. So whenever there are these Rishonim who do seem to have a dispute, we always have to go, what did the Shulchan Aruch paskin? The Shulchan Aruch mentions a dispute. And the Ramah concludes that due to this dispute, women should hear Havdalah for men rather than reciting it themselves. Noshim chayovis b'Havdalah, kishem shechayovis b'Kiddush. However, he says yesh mi shecholek. He says some say that women are obligated just like men, but some don't agree. Says the Ramah, al kein lo yavdilu atzman. That's why our Ashkenazic women, they have this myth that if they make Havdalah, they're going to grow a mustache. Like if they drink.
It's just drinking the wine.
But that I believe that all of that derived from this, that the Ashkenazi women don't make Havdalah, they're supposed to listen to it from their husbands.
So the Iranian women do say Havdalah, they have masters. The Bach argues that even if women are not obligated to recite Havdalah, they may do so optionally. Now, we've seen this before. All mitzvos that women are not obligated to do, lulav, shofar, sukkah, Ashkenazic women are allowed to choose to do it and make a bracha on it. There is a machlokas with the Sfardim. The Sfardim do not have women. They don't have the right to make a bracha on the lulav because it's a bracha levatala. They're not obligated. It's only Ashkenazic women that they're not obligated to do it. But if they choose to do it, and they're allowed to make a bracha. Just as Ashkenazic women recite a bracha over other mitzvahs that they are exempt from. So the Bach is saying, even though from a technical standpoint, women might not be obligated, they can choose to be obligated. And therefore he says, just like they make a bracha on the lulav, they can make a bracha on Havdalah. The Magen Avraham offers possible reasons why Havdalah may be different. But he ends up concluding that the Bach is correct. Ubach kasav, afilam andam shipturos. So even according to, we had a dispute. Some say they're chayiv, others say they're potter. Well, even according to the ones that say they're potter, mikol mokum yichon lavi latzman come up with shofar v'lulav. Just like shofar and lulav are time-bound mitzvahs.
Women, therefore, are not obligated to do them. Yet they can choose to do so and make a bracha. They can do so here. Says the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram, Rav Avram Gombiner, lived in the late 1600s, early 1700s. And the Magen Avram is probably the main, in Orach Chaim, in Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avram, at least for Ashkenazim, is one of the major commentators. So he says, Shafilu yesham anoshim, b'minik shafilu yesham anoshim shechom lishmo mipiyam avdilin latzman ad kan lashon. That even if men are present, and the women can hear from them, they still recite Havdalah by themselves. However, Efshar Didas Ramah, the mitzvah sheyesh ba'asiyah, Rishon lasos ulevarich. So, the Magen Avram wants to say maybe that Havdalah is different than shofar and lulav. Shofar and lulav are physical actions that you do. You take the lulav and you shake it. You blow the shofar. Havdalah is reciting words. There's a principle that Amira is not action. It's not doing something. So perhaps, as the Magen Avram, the Ramah, who told women not to make Havdalah, is seeing a distinction that when are women permitted to take on a mitzvah that they're not obligated to do, when it's an action mitzvah, like lulav or shofar. Then they're rishoin lasos ulevarich. Then they're allowed to physically do the mitzvah and make the bracha on it. Aval badavar she'ein bo ela habracha. What is Havdalah? Havdalah is just the bracha. Baruch atah Hashem ma'ad ben kodesh l'chol. There is no action that goes along with it. Remember, all those other things we do have nothing to do with the Havdalah. They're different. They're a bracha on the light. They're a bracha on the besamim. But the bracha of Havdalah, just like Kiddush, is Baruch atah Hashem and Kaddish Shabbos. You're not doing anything. It's the same thing for Havdalah. So El Bracha Kon Ein Rishos. Perhaps then they're not permitted. So always after Rosh Chodesh, for example, this Motzei Shabbos, we're going to be Makadesh, we're going to do Kiddush Levana after Ma'ariv, Motzei Shabbos. But women, we don't come home and our women do Kiddush Levana. It's only men who do Kiddush Levana. Why? So the Magen Avram is pointing out that's the same thing. Women, if they're not, it's tied to time, Kiddush Levana. When do you make the bracha of Kiddush Levana? Right after the new moon. So they're not chayiv to do that. And maybe, according to this reasoning, they're also not allowed to decide, I choose to do it. Because it's not one of these mitzvahs that has an action and a recitation. It's a recitation only. But after saying all the sides why women shouldn't do it, the Magen Avram ends up saying the Bach allowed women to do it, and therefore the Ikar Halacha is like the Bach. The Mishnah Berurah points out that those women who have the custom to avoid drinking from the wine used for Havdalah will need to listen to men reciting Havdalah if possible. So my wife has this strong minhag not to drink of the wine. So the Shlot writes, in the name of the Tolos Yaakov, that based on the view in Chazal, that the tree of knowledge in Gan Eden was a vine, Chava planned to separate from Adam Arishon by giving him wine. And therefore, women have the custom not to drink from the Havdalah cup. This reason is alluded to by the Magen Avram. Recent Achronim suggest more halachic reasons, not these mystical reasons, such as that not drinking serves as a reminder that they should not recite Havdalah themselves, which is the way I learned. That, like I said earlier tonight, that whole thing of don't drink the wine, you're going to grow a mustache, is just a way for them to remember, oh, the halacha says, the Ramah says, we shouldn't say Havdalah, we should listen to our husbands or other men. Or that the bracha upon the besamim and fire constitute an interruption between the bracha and the wine and drinking for women if they are exempt. So that's a very technical issue, meaning when we make Havdalah, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech habayis pri hagafen. And then, for example, the night of Kiddush, Friday night, we then recite the paragraph of Kiddush, Baruch atah Hashem Mekadesh Shabbos, and we drink the wine. Now, there's no hefsek, there's no interruption between making the bracha on Boi Pri Hagafen and drinking it by reciting that Kiddush, because that's the whole point of making the Boi Pri Hagafen. It's connected to that. But if women are not really obligated in Havdalah, and they make the bracha of Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech habayis pri hagafen, and then they do these extraneous things that they're not really chayiv to do, it's going to be a hafsaka between the bracha and drinking the wine. That's another technical halachic reason given as to why women don't drink the wine by Havdalah. Okay. So, says the Mishnah Berurah, Hinei lefi ma shekosav Magen Avram la'el, b'siv koten daled, denogu anoshim shelo lishtos mikos Havdalah, im kein belav kol hatamim, even if you didn't have all the reasons, heich tavdil batzma v'lo ein echol lishtos hakos. She can't really drink the kos. B'chach kosav bal derech hachayim, ella kanaz Magen Avram lahakel b'she'ein lo mimilot says. Let's say she doesn't have somebody that she can listen to. Then she should make Havdalah. You hear this, Susie? If there is no one that she can listen to Havdalah, she can make Havdalah and drink the wine. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The Aruch HaShulchan points out that the practice to avoid drinking from the Havdalah cup is merely a custom of some women. And when necessary, she may certainly drink. Says Vitamini, I'm surprised. It's not a din, it's a minig. Not everybody is worried about that. So in a situation where she is doing the Havdalah, because her husband is not there, she certainly should drink. In the Bir Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah concludes that according to all views, women are not obligated to recite the bracha of Boi Mereah Eish over the Havdalah candle. The Bir Halacha is the Mishnah Berurah. Umistapakna, he says he's in doubt. We mentioned the opinions that women are obligated to do Havdalah. He's in doubt in Chayeves B'Birchas Haner. The Mishnah Berurah is wondering, are women obligated in the Borei Mehorea Eish, the bracha over the fire? The Bishma Havdalah. So I understand, says the Mishnah Berurah, Havdalah Afshu Zman Grama, even though it's a mitzvah tied to time, Nichlel is the mitzvah de Zochor. But we said it's connected to the Zochor V'Shomer, Shehi Sheichel L'Shabbos, K'mo Shekosav V'Rab. Filu Man Domar D'Rabbanan, even according to the one that says it's rabbinic, Dumi de Kiddush Taknua. They made the takana that just like women make Kiddush, they make Havdalah, Masha Ein Kein Ner. Now, why do we make a bracha on the fire? Shenitken al Briyas Ha'or b'Motzei Shabbos. Adam HaRishon was given the gift of fire as the sun set the first Motzei Shabbos. That's why we say Borei Mereah Eish. Because that's when the fire was created. Therefore, it's very much tied to time. Why do we make Borei Mereah Motzei Shabbos? It has nothing to do with Shabbos. It has to do with the fact that fire was created. It's not a Shabbos Dikadin. The only time we can say women are somehow connected to Havdalah because we can compare it to Kiddush, and just like women with Kiddush, they refrain from the negatives, so we also give them the positives. But making the bracha of Boim Ra'esh has nothing to do with Shabbos. It has to do with the fact that on Motzei Shabbos the fire was created, and therefore it's tied to time, and therefore the she's potter from that. Ein lomar kiven shnik bas bebrachas Havdalah chadadinlu. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is waiting for one of us to jump and say, once they connected the Boim Ra'esh to Havdalah, so it follows the Havdalah. Women are obligated in Havdalah. So the Mishnah Berurah says, the Bir Allah says, don't say that. It's not one din. This is Eino. First of all, you can make the Boim Ra'esh by itself. You don't have to do it with Havdalah. Gamkin v'gam ein mechuyev latzar achar or. And for example, if you don't have fire, you don't have to go run around and look for fire. Kidla kamon. V'ulai kiven de lachatchila mitzvah l'sadra. But there is a mitzvah l'chatchila to do all of these, the fire and the spice at the time of Havdalah. Chadadin look, they are considered one din. But the Yosef Lomar de Eina Chayeves bebrachas hanel kula almo. The Mishnah Berurah, though, entertains the thought, he thinks it makes more sense that they're not machayev at all. Now, the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, Rav Neuwirth, rules, based upon the Bir Allah, that since women are not obligated to recite the bracha of the candle, they should not do so when reciting Havdalah themselves. A woman, her husband is traveling, and therefore she has no one to be Yotzei Havdalah from. So she has to make Havdalah by herself. So Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa says, Tav dil la'atzma v'tishta min hayayin. She should make the Havdalah and drink the wine. But she should not make the boy Rebbe Orei Ha'esh. However, Rav Moshe Feinstein disagrees with this position and writes that women are obligated in the bracha on the ner as well. Furthermore, he argues that even if they are not obligated, they may recite this bracha voluntarily. Ulanias daiti, says Rav Moshe, in his humble opinion, yesh len levarach al birchas haner. The chenu mashmei masha mechaber kosav l'dei harishona stam nashim chayvus b'Havdalah. Just like the Shulchan Aruch said in his first comment that he thinks women are obligated biblically in Havdalah. He doesn't say, that it should refrain from the candle bracha. And even if we say that there's a side to say that they should be potter from this, because shuzman grama, because it's tied to time, like we said tonight many times, mitzvahs that are time-bound, like lulav and shofar, women can choose to do it. So here as well, even though the Boim Ra'esh, as we explained, is to commemorate the creation of fire, Motzei Shabbos, and therefore it's tied to time, they're allowed to choose to do it, just like those other ones. He says this attempt to say that the bracha of Boim Ra'esh is tied to time, it's not clear. Anytime we have a bracha on a mitzvah, or for something that happened to Klal Yisrael, the Anshe Knesset Gdola said, if you hear thunder or you hear lightning, see lightning, you make these brachas. It's not really tied to time. You don't know when it's going to be thunder and lightning. It happens then. That he says that doesn't make it a time-bound mitzvah. when the Chazal made these brachos, like when you see thunder, lightning, it's not necessarily that it's tied to times. When you see these actions, the lachen shapir mebirchas shechianu kol davar ba mizman lezon. We do see that women do recite the brach of shechianu when they do the lulav. We say shechianu because it's a mitzvah that comes from time to time. They do that. So Rav Neuwirth summarizes in Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasa some other practical guidelines with respect to women reciting Havdalah or hearing it from others. He notes that if a man has already fulfilled his obligation of Havdalah, he should not recite Havdalah for a woman who has not yet heard it. It means the woman would have to do it herself. Therefore, he recommends men not to fulfill their obligation for Havdalah in shul or elsewhere if there are women in the family that have not yet heard it, since it is preferable for them to recite it themselves. No, that doesn't make any sense. Let's see what the Shmir Shabbos actually says in Hebrew. Isha shekvar hivdi latzma, a man who was already made Havdalah, or Sham Havdalah me'acher, or he heard it in shul, Beis HaKnesses, v'yatzid echavosu, machlokes haposkim hi, imuter lavdol b'shvil isha. It's a machlokes whether he can do it for his wife. Lachein, imein sham ish lo hivdi ladayin. If there's no man who didn't make Havdalah, mutar shetavdi, she should make Havdalah by herself. The tov yasa ish. Better if the man is in shul, im yiskavin sololat says Havdalah. He should have a negative kavana and say, I'm not being yotze with that Havdalah. Asher mavdim v'es hakneses, kadesh yuchal avdil v'veso, so he can then make Havdalah at home for his wife. Yotze hu atzma v'gam motzis mei beso. Isha mavdila latzma, a woman who makes Havdalah for herself. Af yichol lahotzias chaverta yidei choves Havdalah. She can be motzi another woman. Aval ena ish yichol lahotzi yidei choves Havdalah sa'ish. Because there's this question whether they have the same chiyuv or not. Among Sfardim poskim, there seems to be more of a consensus that women are obligated in Havdalah like men, because the Shulchan Aruch paskin that way, the Rambam paskin that way, right? Since the Shulchan Aruch appears to prefer that approach. Thus, the Yalkut Yosef writes that women are obligated in Havdalah, including the bracha on the fire, and she may recite it herself if she wishes. Alternatively, even if a man who has heard Havdalah already may recite Havdalah for her. And a similar position is taken by Rav Ben Sina B'Shol, who adds, if a man recites Havdalah for a woman after reciting himself, she should recite the bracha on the fire. V'chein noagu sha'af im abal kvar yivdil. The minig is that if the husband already made Havdalah, sheyachol avdil ishto l'hotzi ota b'chol seder Havdalah, and can be motzi. That's according to the Sfardim. Kol makom tov l'chatchila shet birchas haner tevarcha isha ba'atzma. But she should make her own birchas haner. Page 172. What are you not allowed to do before Havdalah? To ensure that mitzvah Havdalah is fulfilled, Chazal forbade the consumption of food and drink, as well as the performance of malacha prior to Havdalah. We will examine each of these prohibitions. Eating and drinking. The Gemara Masechta Psachim explicitly prohibits beginning to eat prior to reciting Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos. Though one is permitted to continue a bread meal that commenced prior to nightfall. For example, Shalosh Shudas. As long as we started before night, which we do because we start right after Mincha, you can continue that meal. You don't have to stop. Otherwise, like, let's say you didn't eat, and Tzeisa Kachavim comes, you're not allowed to eat until you make Havdalah. The Gemara even records differing opinions. as to whether drinking water is included. Rav Chanani bar Shalmei v'Talmidei de Rav Haviyasri b'Sudusa. They were eating a Suda. The Koyalei Rav Amnuna Sabo. The elder Rav Amnuna stood there. Amrle Zil Chazi I Magdish Yoma. Let's see. Yes. They're eating Friday afternoon. And he told them, go check, has Shabbos started or not through Tzeisa Korchavim? V'nikvi l'Shabbos, should we establish Shabbos? Amar lo tzrichisu, Shabbos akava nafshei. Shabbos establishes itself. Whatever you continue eating after Tzeis is considered a Shabbos meal. Svor minei, he understood, ki echad akava l'kiddush. Just like nightfall requires us to recite Kiddush, kach kaval avdal. So too on the way out, nightfall triggers avdal. Amar Rav Amram, hachem Rav l'Kiddush kovas, v'lo avdal's kovas. So hanimili in mifsik. That's to interrupt a meal that you have begun before Shabbos started, and then you have to interrupt the meal to say Kiddush. There we say Delo Mafsekina. You don't have to recite. Or if you started a meal during Shalosh Shudas, and then Tzeisa Kachavim comes, you don't have to stop eating and make Havdalah. You can continue eating. Aval aschuli lo maschalin, but you don't start. Umifsik nami, and this interrupting, nami lo amarn ela b'achila. That's regarding eating. Aval b'shtia lo, but you can interrupt with drinking. Ushtia nami lo amarn ela b'chamra v'shecha. That's wine and beer. Aval maya lesson, but drinking water is not a problem. This is all the Gemara. Upligid Ravuna chazi lahu gavi d'shasa maya korem Avdol. Ravuna saw somebody drinking water before Avdol. Amrle lo mistafim mar ma'ach askara. Are you not afraid of diphtheria? Askara is where like there's a membrane that develops like at your throat, and that's like diphtheria. So it's a bad thing that you're drinking water. The Tana Mishmeder of a kid kolatom klum kodem sheyavdil. Whoever tasted something, even water, misos askara, is going to die of diphtheria. So Rabbanan and Rav Ashi look up the Amay. But in Rav Ashi's yeshiva, they didn't care about drinking water. So how do we rule? The Shulchan Aruch rules that drinking water before Avdol is permitted, but quotes a dispute as to whether this applies only during Bein HaShmoshes. Is this only between Shkia and Seis, or even one Shabbos is certainly over by the 3 stars? There are more rules leniently, permitting drinking water even when it's definitely night after Seis. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Asur lechol shum davar, can't eat anything. Or afilu d'shtos yayin, or sham mashkin chutz mimayim, you can't drink anything, not wine, not beer. You can drink water. Mishatech shach, achi yavdil. Once there's tzeis and you make avdil, aval ma'aya, yoshev ochel mibod yom. But if you started eating before nightfall, the chashma became dark, and it's lavzi, you can continue eating. If you were eating, sitting and eating, and it got dark, tzarach lavzi, then you have to stop. Only if you're unsure. You can finish your meal. That you don't have to interrupt the meal. Now, based on this lenient ruling of the Ramah, the Taz concludes that during Bein HaShmoshes, you can even start a meal. So, in Shul, after Shkia, according to this Taz, you could even start Shalosh Shudas. Arif Aran Pirshu, Da'ach Koivas Nafshe L'Kiddush Ma'ir B'Safik Chashecha. There's one stringency that you have to stop eating. When they said you can continue your meal, it was only a doubt if it was night. But once it's vaday night, 3 stars, you have to stop. And there's a chumra beis. Can you start the meal? If it's ben hashmashos, you shouldn't start. That's only the opinion of the Yeshomrim. But harosh mafarish hapshat the ma'ir afilu b'vadei chashecha shein tzarich lahafsik. That if you started your meal before, and now 3 stars are out, you still don't have to stop your meal. B'shil avdaluf izeh yesh kula gam baschala b'say. It means there's a leniency that you could start your meal even ben hashmashos. The mutter lahaskel v'lo amru shein lahaskel al b'vadei. You cannot start a meal after tzeis. The menal levakesh chumra. We're not going to start a meal. The given the cost of Ramad that minig pashut kisvor rishona. The minig is like the first logic. You could start your meal even ben hashmashos. Don't criticize sitting down to a big shalosh shudis when you're not sure whether it's dark or not. The Magen Avraham and other Achronim disagree with the Taz and maintain that starting a meal during Bein Hashmash is prohibited. The Mishnah Berurah rules stringently, although he makes an exception for a person who has not yet fulfilled the mitzvah of eating 3 meals. So this is what the shuls use, that for people who didn't eat shalosh shudis, and even though shkia has come, you're allowed to start shalosh shudis, and you're allowed to complete it. And as we learned tonight, you don't have to be mafsik, even the time of Dola comes. A Rebbe comes, and the shalosh shudis is 2 hours long. You can continue it. You don't have to stop and make Avdol. Rav Nevensal writes, in the name of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that this leniency does not apply in Eretz Yisrael, where sunset is less than a half an hour before Tzeisak HaChavim. Adoni Mori v'Rabbi Rav Shlomo Zalman Pasach, Shein Litol Yadayim L'Suda Shlishas Lachar Shkia. He says, you should not sit down for Shalosh Shudis after Shkia. Ve'atamu mishum she'Eretz Yisrael nogim kagra. We follow the Gra. The Tzeisak HaChavim u'pachos b'chatishur achar Shkia. The Gra held that Tzeisak HaChavim was 30 minutes after Shkia. L'chein, ein Rishai Odin Laskal B'Suda achar Shkia. Shouldn't do it. Mishnah Berurah Ayri Aliba Deshitas Rabbeinu Tam, Binyan Zman Ben Hashmashos. Rabbeinu Tam remembers 72 minutes, so the Mishnah Berurah was following that. Kimavur B'Shar Tzion Kan. L'Akein Kosov Shegam Achar Shkia Rishai Odin Laskal B'Suda Zu. That's why the Mishnah Berurah said that even after Shkia you could start Shalosh Shudis. Ki L'Shitas Rabbeinu Tam Shkia Kodemes L'Chatzi Shah Shekodim Tzeisak HaChavim. There's a much longer time between Shkia and Tzeisak HaChavim. Sharak me'az osur laskal b'suda al shispal v'yav. Only at that point would it be osur to start a meal. U'ma'aseh b'artzos hatzafon, in northern places like in Poland, there was more than 30 minutes between Shkia and Tzeisak HaChavim. That's why the Mishnah Berurah permitted. Rav Ovadia Yosef disagrees, writing that one who did not yet eat Suda Shlishis may do so even after sunset. And he doesn't adjust this based on location. He adds that even if a person is not eating his 3rd meal, if he's hungry, he may eat until a half an hour before Tzeisak HaChavim. In the Sharat Tzion, he explains that this is because one may rely on the view of Rabbeinu Tam that Bein Hashmashos only starts long after sunset. However, the Egos Moshe writes that this leniency is astonishing, as half an hour before Tzeisak HaChavim, Rabbeinu Tam is already a certain night, according to the Gra. Nevertheless, Rav Moshe is quoted as still allowing, beginning Suda Shlishis in New York up to 9 minutes after sunset. See, the Ktsosa writes that one already ate Suda Shlishis should perhaps not rely upon this leniency in Eretz Yisrael, whose darkness falls more quickly than in Europe or Eretz Yisrael. Says the Ovadia Rav Ovadia, Mishalo, he speak, Lasa Sura Shlishis, Arachar Shashaka Cham. If you only started Shalshis after Shkia, Viniskasis Meinenu, he says we shouldn't, it's hidden from our eyes to Aser starting Shalosh Shudas. Mutter Lechel Sura Shlishis ad Kereva Shah Achar Shkia. Until about 50 minutes after Shkia. Then you can't start anymore. The Pischei Tshuva writes that if one did not yet begin Suda Shlishis before sunset, it's customary to permit beginning the meal, even for Ashkenazim, provided it's before Tzeitzah Kachavim. Since eating Suda Shlishis constitutes a mitzvah, one may rely on the more lenient opinions, such as the Sharat Sion. Let's summarize the practical guidelines for one is unable to begin eating Suda Shlishis before Shkia. In many areas of the diaspora, such as the United States and Europe, one may begin Suda Shlishis during Bein HaShmoshes. It's based on the Sharat Sion. In Eretz Yisrael, some hold that one may also rely on the same leniency, Rav Yosef, while others hold that one may never begin Suda Shlishis after Shkia. That was Rosh Hashanah. We saw in the Gemara that one who was drinking wine or beer before sunset must stop at sunset until after Havdalah. While one eating bread doesn't have to interrupt. But the Aruch HaShulchan writes that this only applies to eating a meal with bread. If a person does not eat bread, it's not termed a meal in this context. He must stop at sunset. So this is very important for all of us. You must eat bread at Shalosh Shudas. Otherwise, you don't have a permission to continue eating after Shki. It's got to be a bread-related meal. If you were just snacking, or then you have to stop. You're not kovei suda. You can eat fish and fruit. That's not enough. Even if you eat a cake, they would have washed also it's a temporary eating. That's the Aruch HaShulchan. Rav Ben Sina Bashul argues that since it's possible to make a meal by eating sufficient amounts of mizonos, like we learned, you don't have to interrupt when eating a small amount of mizonos. It's like eating bread. B'Shulchan Aruch, you started eating when it was daylight. V'chashka, then Shkia came. You started drinking. Then you have to stop. It's not kviyus suda. Eating fruit. It's not kviyus suda. It's tzarech lafsik. If you eat cake, if you eat enough of it, it's considered kviyus suda. It's still kviyus suda. Even you can continue with your eating. Okay, this will stop here. We've still finished malacha. What kind of work you can do before Havdalah? What's the latest time for Havdalah? And then we will do some more dinim of Havdalah. Okay. Back to Tuesday, yes. Have a good week.